Hello, and welcome to the third episode of the Sarah Space Collective. I'm your host, Sam Hutchison, co founder of Sarah, and today my guest is Asta Jala, a space architect with practices in Canada and India, and we're going to be talking about the future of living and working in space. Thank you for joining us, and hope you enjoy the episode. Hi, Asta.
Hi, Sam. Thank you for
How's it
inviting.
going? Thanks so much for
Um,
coming on.
it's going amazing. I'm super excited to be a part of your podcast today.
We are too. Um, we were having a chat before about space architecture. It's probably the coolest job title on the planet right now. And
Yes,
one of the reasons I was so excited to get you on is because one of the things that's long interested me is thinking about how sort of existing terrestrial jobs are going to transform and change as human activity starts to move off world. And I can't think of a practice that is more fundamentally sort of ripe for transformation by living and working in either zero gravity or low gravity than architecture. So my first question for you is how do you even begin? You've never been to space. You can't have uh, sort of practice runs, with building materials and structures. Um, how challenging is it to think about designing
yeah,
buildings in low gravity, sort of space stations in space? How do
yeah,
you how big a challenge is it? How do you deal with that, and how is it going to
yeah,
change the way that we kind of
yes,
think about the spaces humans live in?
yes. That's a very interesting question because that completely defines my whole career and my whole practice.
Sure.
So, you're asking me about like my last 7 years in space architecture to describe in like the next seven
Mhm.
minutes. I
You
think
can you can
it
take as
is.
long as you want.
Yes. So to design in space, we have to first create our own space on Earth. So through analogs. So how do we usually start when we are doing for actual orbital habitats, let's say? So we have to understand the mission. How long is the mission is going to be for? What kind of activities will be performed? How long the astronauts are going to be staying inside this orbital habitat or international space station? Or what is a budget? Because budget is also plays a very important role, because the bigger the structure and bigger the longer the
Mhm.
mission, it is more expensive. So all, one of the core things for a space architect is also to consider the cost effectiveness. So when we design, we have to think how we can efficiently use the space. So and how we can modularize in future, or how we can increase the volume mass ratio through inflatable structures or through origami
Mhm.
inspired structures,
Mhm.
right? So usually we start with the mission planning and then followed by mission architecture. So now currently what happens in international space station, we already have the infrastructure ready, right? But let's say for example, I proposed a project for ISRO recently for Gaganyaan and Bharatiya Antariksh Station. So we have to very thoroughly understand that if the Indian government is sending is their astronauts to space, what are the first activities they're going to perform for the first 5 to 10 years. So the most important thing is, I think, is medical experiments for because I think to survive in space for longer period of time and to also land ourselves on the moon in the future, the medical health of a person is very important. So human factor design is the core of the space architecture.
Mhm.
So when we design human factor, we also have to see psychological factors, sociological factors,
Mhm.
materials, engineering.
Mhm.
Uh, all of this comes together to form space architecture. And when I say space architecture, it is not only about uh, architecture in space. It is also about extreme environment habitats on Earth. For
Mhm.
example, underwater habitats in Antarctica and Arctic, airborne habitats, deep ocean habitats. So I think also for habitats in extreme environment, like in deserted areas. So after mission architecture, we move on to mission planning. and then we very thoroughly understand what kind of activities. For example, okay, let's say for example we have a, so basically in habitat we have very common things. The most common habitat functions are an airlock design, a
Hmm.
galley is
Hmm.
basically like a mini kitchen in space. Then
Hmm.
we have a waste hygiene compartment, and then we have a biolab or a medbay lab or an engineering lab or a chem lab. These are the most common things that we have. So then we very thoroughly investigate. Okay, let's say for example, if we have a crew quarters, then how many astronauts are we accommodating in? Or if we have a biolab, then what kind of plantation are we growing? How big is the payload experiment? What kind of devices are going? We also then let's say for example, if we have a galley, then we also have to understand that how much space the dehydration system is taking, consuming, what how our dining table is going to look like, all of these things. So we basically, I think what personally I do is I completely visualize my life in space sitting on earth and then I try to manifest it through my design. So, and to manifest the design we have these analogs. So I introduced this India's first space analogs. We started off with lunar analogs in White Desert, Kutch, Dholavira, and then the recent one we did with ISRO and IIT Bombay in Ladakh. So in analogs, we try to create a very stimulating environment to that of the space.
Hmm.
Of course, we cannot create the anti-gravity or zero gravity things like that, but we
Do
create
do
extreme
you
conditions.
pretend? Do, do you at least pretend? Are you able to simulate? Do you get people on pulleys and?
Yes, yes, yes. So we have a gravity stimulators, which so we can definitely mimic the moonwalk on Earth. That is very
Okay.
much doable. So for that we have to design a truss system, and we have to calculate the weight of the human being, how he will weight on the moon, and
Hmm.
then we can make the person do a moonwalk. We also have designed a 360 moonwalk simulator at my studio space, but we can't have like a 24-hour zero gravity. Like it's just like
Sure.
experiment thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and that is mainly to we have this 360-degree stimulator, and it is mostly for to understand how our hands, legs, our neck rotations are in anti-gravity. Like because when we design for space, we do not really do in feet and inches or centimeters. We design in volume and mass.
Okay.
So our body behaves very different in space. We don't have a complete momentum on our postures, right?
Hmm.
So, coming back to analogs, in analogs, we completely try to simulate and mimic the space conditions, and we can only do that by placing the habitat in extreme environment. Now, life support system is not a part of my space architecture, but we also have to see how big is the life support system, where will be the CO2 scrubbers, where will be the air vents, oxygen supplies, how big is the waste recycling water system is, how the food waste is going to be stored. All of this is also a part of a design in space architecture. So we can definitely do all of those on analogs through analogs.
And
So I think that is
you're
yes.
effectively building. I was thinking, reflecting as you were going through that. I mean, being a space architect is one of the fundamental differences um, in space is that you're building machines at the end of the day. You know, these are not houses or habitats in the sense that we understand them on Earth. Being in an extreme environment, presumably you as a space architect have got to have a very robust sense of all of the varied technologies. You know, whether it's the impact on the structure of the station of thrusters or orbital mechanics, presumably, you know, G forces,
Yes.
life support, scrubbers, you know, the works. So, have you got a sort of heavy engineering background in order to get your head around all that kind of system engineering complexity?
Uh, I wouldn't say that heavy engineering background I have, but definitely I have not heavy but moderate engineering, because
Roger.
at the end of
Sure.
the day, yes, because see, I still need to understand the materials. Like, are we using multi-layer insulation, MOL, or are we using Teflon or aerogel insulation? So I
Mhm.
definitely need to have an understand of the materials
Mhm.
of, so that I can understand how much the space radiation is going to be, where to place the window system, glass partitions, where which side the entry of the habitat will be, and how we can because that helps me to design the lighting system for space. So lighting system is a part of my space design. So we can do
Mhm.
the circuitry lighting system, but to design a circuitry lighting system, I need to understand the space radiation, right? And then also to understand to keep the comfortable indoor environment, the indoor temperatures. I need to understand the thermal conductivity and radiation. So, moderate understanding of materials is definitely required,
Mhm.
but we also need to have a team of engineers, thermal analyst, structural engineer, mechanical engineer, who have like a years of an experience into the
Mhm.
subject and who have extraordinary on designing of the planet to be able to design for space. Because that profession completely uses a different softwares. Now, let's say, for example, for space architecture, we use Rhino, Grasshopper, Blender, those kind of design softwares. We are mostly focused on design softwares, but whereas the engineering companies will use like ANSYS, SolidWorks. So it's kind of a difference.
And do you start with? I mean, do you start with the requirements that are given to you by the customer or the space agency, and then build it out from there, or do you take them sort of designs and say, are there ways in which? I'm sure that's the way you love it went. I'm sure it
Yeah.
doesn't go that way, but presumably
Uh,
that's the way it goes. They say it's six people. You know, they got to have three meals a day. They need X amount of space, and then you're building around those requirements.
that's a very smart question, I would say, because okay, let me ask you one question quickly. How many space tourist companies are there who are who we only have like barely two, Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, and I think Space Perspective is coming in the picture for the space
Sure.
travel, right?
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, three companies are there in the world right now who are successfully accessing the space travel. Now let's talk about the companies who are doing research. Is NASA? Let's say NASA. Then with the Chinese Space Agency, we have JAXA, European, and ISRO. ISRO is not yet to send astronauts to space, right?
No.
So do I really have a customer? Not really.
You tell me. You
I
tell me.
don't really have. So, especially being in a developing country,
Hmm.
and I've been in Canada, but Canada is also Canadian Space Agency is also a part of NASA Space Agency because they did this robotic arm for the
Sure.
ISS.
Yeah.
But they are not really working on individually with the astronaut training centers and everything, right? So I think in the world right now, the only customer that I can have is either NASA or US private companies, maybe Exam Space, let's say Exam Space or Sierra Space or somebody in ESA, right? So
Vast space would be another one. They're building private space stations as well.
yes, but still it's a long way to go. And then what happens? Like I can't really work for a foreign companies so easily because there are government regulations in
Sure.
space sector, right? So what happens, especially, I can say 50-50 because there are some companies who are very ambitious, who are startup companies abroad, and who
Hmm.
wants my expertise, help them to design because they really want this nice looking aesthetics
Hmm.
and want to also prove that it's technically right. So I do have some customers abroad, uh, and then I also have. And what happened in India? It is me who has proposed this because in India,
Got it.
especially at ISRO, we do not really have. There was not a concept of space architecture
Okay.
before. So now, so how I approached them a year back saying that, okay, your design looks great in terms of engineering, but the
Sure.
design is thriving. So my personal motivation was when a Gaganyaan module is in the space, of course the whole world is going to be watching it when our astronauts will be live telecasted, right? So I
Hmm.
don't want the world to think what a boring design they are in. They should be like, look at them. They entered into space just now, but they still have a very thriving design. And the other countries and should also feel that why we do not have this. So I was like, we can still be in the era of aesthetics, like SpaceX, Dragon module.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so it's a two-way thing. And now I think now because of my a lot of efforts trying to get into space agency at ISRO, now we have requirements coming in for space architecture design.
And
Long way to go.
what are the you mentioned a couple of design and sort of deploy systems, origami, 3D printing. What are the what are the technologies that are coming online now that are going to disrupt the way that we uh, build structures in space, or let's say, for example, on the moon or Mars?
Yes. So look, for that, let us look back what is actually existing, right? So International Space Station was assembled in multiple launches. It was not assembled at one go. Then we have another space habitat. The only another space habitat we have is this Apollo landing module on
Sure.
Moon.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Apart from these two, we don't really have any space structure right now, which is in the space, except Bigelow's that inflatable
Sure.
habitat, which we did an experiment. I think, and also Chinese is also like in multiple launches.
Sure.
So looking
But
at the
but your
previous
point
mission,
is they're assembling the structures on Earth and then they're being deployed, expanded.
yes, that's what they are doing right now. So in multiple launches, we are sending structures and then they are assembled in space.
Yeah.
So mostly the concept is more about in-space assembly, right? But now I think, from my experience, that has been a very costly affair in previously. So what now most of the agencies are trying to do is to design inflatable habitats because they don't need multiple launches, they can be inflated, and they are very cost effective, and they're also very lightweight. So companies like Lockheed, I have seen a concept from Lockheed Martin having inflatable. Blue Origin space station is also inflatable structure. Sarah Space is also inflatable. Exim Space does not have inflatable. TransHep was one of the inflatable technology being proposed. There are many companies I know who are working on inflatables because myself was also working on inflatable structures. Uh, so I think inflatable is one of the upcoming technology. Apart
Mhm.
from that, I have also come across projects like in space welding technology. So what happens, the habitat is launched in with panels and it is assembled in space using a toolkit which can do electron beam welding.
Sure.
So that is also another way that they are doing it.
And is
uh,
that and is that autonomous or is that by humans?
no, it's autonomous.
That's a shame. We need more jobs in space, but okay. They give it all
Yes.
to the robots. Sure. It's cheaper.
So,
Okay.
but the thing is, also, this is still a very big challenge, inflatable or origami structures or electron beam welding, because you can deploy the structure, but how are you going to do the interior fittings? It's very complex.
Right.
How do you deploy the interior, right? So let's say you have a big balloon, you are able to blow up a big balloon in space,
Hmm.
but then the big balloon needs to have floors, life support systems,
Hmm.
wiring, plumbing systems, electricals, experiments, payloads, furniture, storage, everything working gaily. So we don't really have a solution for it yet. But then I have seen various concepts of interior designing. Now, also this concept for this. Now, let's when we talk about extra terrestrial habitats. So we have seen a concept of 3D printing regolith structures.
Sure.
So what happens? So on when we design on the moon surface, there are two ways we can put up an habitat. One is underground, or one is with the use of 3D printing because it has an extreme space radiation. But it is still a concept, I would say, that there are companies like Icon, Hazel, who have been able to 3D print on Earth, simulating a lunar regolith or Mars
Mhm.
regolith. But doing the same thing on Moon, it's a very big challenge because first you have to transport all those engineering equipments,
Sure.
and then either you have to autonomously manage it from the Earth,
Hmm.
or you need to be there driving a big engineering truck, excavating the soil, and
Hmm.
3D printing it. So it's still a big challenge, I think. Uh, but I think innovation is something we see. We are human beings. We are the most intelligent social beings on earth, right? We are not meant to sleep and eat.
Sure.
So I think our life's purpose is all about thriving, going beyond pushing to extreme what we can do it. So I think that is why we are all trying to find solutions for it.
And do you not think? I mean, obviously, people love talking about AI at the moment. Everyone's very excited about the potential. Um, do you not think I mean, sort of autonomous AI construction is something that's readily achievable in the next 10 years? I mean, back in the day, probably when I was your age, in situ resource utilization was a big concept that people got very excited about. You've only got to send the first robot, and then it
Yeah.
gathers the materials to build the second robot, and then the second robot builds two more robots, and hey presto, you've got an army of robots. You sent one, and suddenly you've got an army of robots sort of
Yeah.
doing all your building for you. But that combination of AI and robotics like has tremendous potential when it comes to
Yeah.
doing the thing that we need to do. I mean, to your point, so our listeners understand that the issue you have with sending humans to assemble structures in space is that they need somewhere to live while they do it. So
Yeah.
the sort of optimized sort of development schedule for in space structures is they've got to be complete before the astronauts arrive. Otherwise, they're going to have a very short trip or a very challenging time.
Yeah.
So that's really what you've got to move. That was what I assumed you've got to move towards autonomous assembly, and then the humans can arrive when the basics are there, and perhaps the more complex tasks that require in situ sort of decision making, in the moment are going to get done by the robots human overlords, although it may be the other, but it may be the other way around by the time we get to the moon. You never know. um, but okay, so 3D printing, and then the origami stuff is a sort of, I is it what it, presumably it is what it sounds like. It's what, designing structures that are sort of cleverly folded up that then
Yeah.
expand without the need for sort of welding or assembly. Is that right?
Yes, yes. So I think you might have seen the solar panels at a space station. They are basically origami inspired design.
Hmm.
Origami is like we used to do in childhood, this paper folding techniques.
Hmm.
But one of the key challenges with origami is the mechanical assembly, because it is very, because origami structures have a lot of joints, mechanical joints. And it is also a very heavy structure. It becomes a very heavy structure because it has to be. It cannot be a fabric origami structure. It has to be metal paneling
Okay.
and a complete system, right? Because after that we cannot really assemble it. So there are two challenges, and I think that is why the concept has taken a step back, and inflatables are more coming into the picture.
Okay.
One is because it is a heavy structure, and one is it has a lot of mechanical joints. Now, let's say, for example, if something is damaged, then the whole structure falls apart.
Got it.
Whereas for the inflatable, we have restraint layers also in case of micrometeorite puncture or something.
Sure.
So I wouldn't say it's a very highlighting process.
On the micrometeorite puncturing, have you seen anything coming out recently? I think one of the sort of ideas that was again long touted, was self-sealing, self-repairing materials. Is there anything exciting out there
Yes.
that you've seen, that you've played with?
Yes, there are materials which are self-healing, but I don't have in-depth knowledge about the subject, I would say. So I would like to keep commenting on it
No
when the
problem.
notes or something.
No problem. I'll keep an eye out. So we got 3D. And can you utilize 3D printing in orbit? Presumably not. You need regolith or some kind of base material, unless
Yes.
unless you do what I've long thought need is. I've long thought one of the biggest near-term commercial opportunities is collecting all of the orbital debris that is such a problem for traffic management, and that you're then sitting on, you know trillions in terms of like cost of launch. And if you could find a way to effectively collect the debris, recycle it, process it, and then you've got the materials in space, yeah, in orbit, ready to build things. I mean, it's a big technical feat, but
Yes.
I once did the calculation. I was like, how much orbital debris is there? What is I can't remember what it was. It was hundreds of thousands of tons. I was
Yes.
like, what is the
And they
what?
fall back also. They also fall back to Earth at
Sure,
times.
sure.
So,
But if you
um,
actually work out what the cost to get all, I mean, all of that material is already sitting there, in
yes,
orbit.
I think bringing those material back to Earth is also going to be a challenge, because what to do with once you bring it back?
Yeah.
I think there should be a way that I came across a project just last year where they use the SpaceX, the recent one, Starship SN15,
Hmm.
and they showed a concept where they collected all the debris, and they had this recycling machine which was inside the SpaceX. So it was not throwing away anywhere. So it was collecting the debris, because most of the debris is metal.
Yeah,
Then they will recycle it and make it into like a plates, and they use that for in space manufacturing.
there you go.
So something like
that's a business plan I would invest in for sure.
yes. So I came across this project, but I'm not really sure of any project who has actually which has actually
Got it.
worked in collecting space
Yeah.
temperature. I see
Yeah.
a lot of projects also, in India. I we have like almost 2,200 space startups right now.
Yeah.
And out of 2,200 space startups, almost 95% companies are focused on this either rocket building, like rocket launches,
Sure.
or this ground situational awareness.
Sure.
And there are hardly, I think, one or two who are into space habitats. So a question. So I think out of the whole world, we barely have two or three countries who are trying to find solution for space debris right now.
No, it's extra. I mean,
It's a
it's very
very
hard.
important subject.
It's like doing your house cleaning and the dust is
Yes.
moving around at 17,000 miles an
Yes.
hour. It's
Yes.
a challenge.
Yes. That's very true. And I think now in the space architecture curriculum, there's also a subject because it is also this is also a concern for space architects because we cannot do the same thing which we did on the Earth in the space, putting up the garbage out, or we cannot do the same thing also
Right.
on the moon. So one of the core things now we also have to consider how are we going to recycle most of the stuff. Even on the when we design for lunar habitats, we have to make sure that everything is recycled, nothing is going waste. So this is a very big technical challenge for space architects right now.
No, and it's not that's driven by commercial concerns, right? That's not it's not recycling sort of because you want to feel good about separating your plastics and your and your biological mass.
Yeah.
It's because anything that you can recycle, you want to recycle so you don't have to pay to bring it up, right?
Yes.
So I mean I probably should have started with this, but did space come first for you, or did architecture come first, and you pivoted into space as a deployment of your skills, or did you want to be an astronaut and you figuring out your path and you thought, well, arch- architecture is space architecture is underserved. How did it come together for you?
Yes. I th- this is a very nice question because this is the I have given so many interviews, but I'm being asked this question for the first time. Space come first for me. I'll tell you how. So when I was I think 13 or 14 years old, I went to this NASA space second. So I've always been a scholar student during my school years,
Hmm.
and we from my school we had an opportunity for two students to go to NASA Space Academy at Huntsville, Alabama Center,
Hmm.
and I went there, and then we were basically trained like these mock astronauts. We were made to wear those space suits and do this underwater and gravity experiments, neutral balance lab, and ride these space rides and things like that. But one of the most interesting thing was to design something on the moon base. And I come from a my mother is a designer, so I had this core skill of creativity, art, design, and I designed this fuel station thinking that what if we end up with a fuel? How do we come back? Because I was a child at that time.
Sure.
And for that, I got a lot of praise, and I also got this NASA Luna Design Contract Award. It's like a
Yeah.
certificate. Yeah,
Certificate.
it's
Okay,
like a
I got
certificate.
you. I got you. I got
It's
you.
not like a paper
How old
project
were
or
you?
something. I was 14
14.
years old. Yes, I still have my picture designing that. And then I just called my mom because this was my first award.
Hmm.
So I call my mom and I say that I want to be a designer because I designed a fuel station on the moon and I got appreciated and got a certificate for it.
Hmm.
So my mom was like, "Why don't you become an architect? Because designing does not takes you to in-depth technicality, but an architect you can understand the concept and the technical background. You can have a technical background." But then I was like, "Mom, but how I will be differentiated from other architects because I want to be designing for space."
Hmm.
So I came up with a concept. I came up with my own term. I want to be a space architect. But at that time, there was nothing like space architecture. But
Sure.
Sam, I tell you something so honestly. I think visualization with faith or belief
Hmm.
definitely helps you to manifest it. And that is what has happened with me. Because that time, there was no education in space architecture. I'm talking about the year probably 2005 or 6.
Oh wow.
Almost, yes. So I finished my high school. I went to pursue architecture, but I did not only wanted to focus on architecture. I also wanted to understand structural engineering, mechanical engineering, HVAC systems. So I did this architecture technology and construction management because I think If I design and I cannot execute it, it's a waste of my time,
Sure.
because execution is the main part of designing. Anyone can have a very great looking concept, but execution is where the most challenge lies in. So if I design, I have to execute it. So I went with this architectural technology and construction management, and then I got a Erasmus scholarship. Then I went to Denmark at VIA at Aarhus Center, and I finished my bachelor's in architecture technology and construction management. But then the question was, how do I do space architecture? Because that was the main career and the main goal.
Mhm.
So I came across a course in Sasakawa in Houston, but that was a very expensive course for international students. It was almost, it was way expensive, and 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 since I made a move to UK, I was completely independent on myself. I did not wanted to go back and ask my parents because it
Sure.
just doesn't make sense. I feel like we should be capable to make sure that we fulfill our own dreams, because it's not our parents' job, right? So I thought, okay.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. But sure, I agree.
So then I was like, okay, I cannot afford this university, but I can at least see what is this university doing. So I came across a conference called ICES. It's International Conference on Environmental Space Systems, where most of the students from this university are participating, because I saw on their website, and it was a place at MIT Boston.
Hmm.
So, and I saw that, okay, students from all top universities are coming there. So I was like, this might be a great opportunity for me to be there.
Hmm.
And at that time, I had made a move to Canada, because I thought if I become a Canadian citizen, it will be much easier for me to work in the US, because
Sure.
US citizenship is very difficult for foreigners, especially
Yeah.
from India and Asian countries, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was in Canada. I designed with. I went through this all NASA Human Design Reference Index books 1, 2, and 3. Basically, those books are being used to design International Space Station. It's called Human Design Reference Index 1, 2, and 3. There are
Okay.
3 big volumes to it. So I self-studied, and I approached a space architect called Bruce McKenzie, who was one of the first space architects in US, and he was one of the first one to also put up a concept of Mars bricks years back, in I think in 1984 or somewhere. So I approached him and I said, "Listen, hey, I want to be a part of this conference. I have studied these NASA books, and I'm putting up my project called Mangala. You can see on my LinkedIn also. It's called Mangala. It's 3D printed Mars habitat. So I need your guidance and support for my project. I need you to evaluate my project." So then I got help from him. And then the conference was open for anyone coming from any university. So I participated. I went there, and the day I entered this hotel, it was a 5-star luxury hotel where then this conference was
Where,
happening
where was it? In
in
Houston.
Boston.
Oh,
I forgot
Boston.
the name of the hotel, but it was in Boston,
Okay.
and it was half sponsored by NASA, Collins Aerospace, and few more big companies in
Sure.
space companies from the US. So I went to this space habitat competition, and I see students from Harvard, MIT,
Hmm.
the Sasakawa, all from top universities. And the
Hmm.
moment I go in, I again walk out because I was so I was scared because I didn't had a background on a subject. I
Sure.
was kind of I was nervous. How do I? And I came to know that my project was going to be judged by astronaut Daniel Burbank, and he has been to space 3 times. So
Okay.
basically, I was like, I think I was 21. So I go out, and I'm like, but then to boost my confidence, I thought a very silly thing. I was like, okay, I'm a human being, everybody poops. So I just motivated
Interest.
myself thinking that this person is going to be judging me also have the
Sure.
same characteristics as mine.
Sure.
And I can walk back with my full confidence. I present the project like I'm the one who's going to build it. But then the amazing thing was it was again shortlisted for top 10 innovation categories.
Congratulations.
And I got a lot of appreciation from this Daniel Burbank astronaut. And
Hmm.
he said that you must go on with this dream of yours,
Oh.
because it is definitely going to take you forward, not now, but in the coming years. And that is how I started. I was looking for a job, unpaid internships, unpaid jobs, researches. But I was not getting an unpaid job or unpaid internship. So I was doing a
And this,
research with
sorry, this was in Canada.
in US. Yes.
Oh, in US now. Okay, fine.
Yes. So after the conference, I was looking because I got a very big network of individuals through that conference.
Sure.
But then I talked with all the students also who studied from Sasakawa. But one of the challenges for them was that international students does not get job in US in space because of the government regulations.
Yeah.
And there are no opportunities for space architects outside the US. Now there is, but that time there was none.
Sure.
So what do we do? So I was like, okay, even if I manage to put up this amount of money and scholarship, but if I'm ending up nowhere in space, then it's gonna be waste of my time. So I better work in architecture and build my execution skills, and with along with that, I can always continue doing research in space. So then I did research with Mars University, and we designed this uh, the first landing systems for Mars with very top researchers. Then I did a lot of publication followed by that, and then possibly more eyes. But then my focus was space. So I was like, okay, if I'm not getting an opportunity, I'm going to create one for myself, and that is how I founded Aka Space Studio in Canada. Uh, and that is how I picked up a project. My first project was a NOVA, which was a next generation deployable origami structure, and a very core intensive research on origami versus inflatables. And that is how I started raising funding for the project, making pitch decks. And then, as I said, the biological clock does not stop. So I had to marry my long term partner. So I made a move back to India because my partner could not make a move to Canada or US.
Got it.
I made a move back, and then I again got my company incorporated here. And I was like, okay, maybe whatever knowledge and everything experience I've gained abroad, I can definitely use it to advance the Indian space architecture system because we do not have that yet. So that is how I launched the first analogs, which was a revenue generating. We had a good ROI on it. And then I self designed the Gaganyaan model, and I said, because I found a mistake in a Gaganyaan design. So basically, the ISRO's Gaganyaan program was supposed
Were they happy? Were they happy to have you point that out? I bet they
they
were.
were,
Yeah, I
they
bet
were,
they
yes,
were. Yeah, sure.
they were very happy because by the time I pointed out, they already had figured out, but it was not publicly
What was the
told.
problem?
So basically, if you just Google search ISRO Gaganyaan program,
Mhm.
you will mostly find images with three cruise seats. Earlier, it was supposed to be three cruise seats. Now, what
I don't
happens?
know what a cruciate is.
Cruise seat is like a seat where the astronaut sits and fly to space.
Perfect.
So the Gaganyaan program the Gaganyaan crew module was supposed to have three crew seats. Now, what happens at ISRO? There are a lot of engineers, great engineers. I wouldn't say
Hmm.
great engineers, but they do not have architects, space architects, right? Now, my
Hmm.
job was to study the ergonomic and anthropometric design. So I was like, okay, maybe let us try to make this ISRO's Gaganyaan model look better because I was not happy with the aesthetics, interior, and I was very inspired with Screw Dragon. So while I was 3D modeling the structure in my computer, I figured out that cruise seats cannot be placed in that habitat. We can only accommodate two cruise seats. So I was like, I need to propose them this. So I basically went and I proposed them the whole process of my designing. I showed them that how we cannot have three cruise seats. I also proposed an innovation in design. I made the seat deployable, a foldable design. I showed them a very I think I sent you that project in my uh,
I saw it.
mail.
Yeah.
So I proposed a foldable design so they can have more space and they can do more experiments in terms of for galley. So then ISRO was very much happy with those with my proposal, and then we collaborated for this analog, and now there are we have future to look forward to in space. That is how my career has been. So I think space is something is always first, and another thing is also at the gym when I always used to do this cardio. I do this
Hmm.
cardio running, and every time I run on the cardio, in the first 10 seconds, I think is okay. It's 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. So this is the sound that is like it's just so thriving because when a rocket is being launched, you have hundreds of people watching it. It's
Hmm.
about this extraordinary thing coming together to go to space. And I am always an extremist. So I always want to do something that nobody has ever done it. Like I
Hmm.
want to go beyond it. So
Sure.
I think, and then I always tell people, okay. So I was also a part of this career astronaut in US, which basically train people to go. It's like a private organization which train people to go to fly to space.
Sure.
I also interviewed with Blue Origin, but it was quite an expensive affair. So I think if I have an opportunity to travel to space in coming future or any time of my life, I will be able to design much better. I can say that I went, I saw, and I designed. It will be like a timestamp of my life. So yeah,
There's
that's how.
there's two. I think there's 2 points that I want to pick up. Um, the first is that you found yourself in a position where the career path that you wanted to pursue was initially not available in your country of origin, and so
Yes.
you went abroad. And then the second challenge was that with the skill set you had, no one thought that they needed a space architect. So you had to create a market for your
Yes.
own sort of skill set effectively by proactively going out there and say, hey, I've reverse engineered your human habitat. It just doesn't work. So I think it's a really good lesson for anyone listening, which is, and sorry, and then the third point is you were proactive in terms of saying, "Hey, if there's no job out there for me, then I'm going to start my own company," and be proactive in terms of convincing people, showing people how important this is. So, those are three. How has it changed now? I mean, one of the themes that emerges out of your career path is, in the beginning, you felt compelled to move abroad in order to pursue your career of interest. Obviously, we've talked about this previously on the podcast, that the Indian space program, it's not just the Indian government space program. You mentioned there are now 2,200 space startups, lots of them trying to build rockets. So I wish them all luck. Um, how has that now changed in terms of the general popular excitement, sort of investment interest in the
Yes.
Indian space sector? Like now, I imagine you wouldn't want to be anywhere else, right? This is probably the best market for an
Yes.
ambitious young space entrepreneur on the planet right now.
Yes. Um, and now we have a lot of funding opportunities from the private, from the government. Like we
Sure.
have a very high annual fiscal budget for space sector. And also this in space coming into the picture has played a very crucial role in developing the space economy for the private space startup companies. Because what InSpace does is InSpace helps to promote small startups like myself,
Hmm.
and so basically they created this economy where they have a bunch of investors and they have a bunch of space startups, and then they arrange meetings, organizing conferences, opportunities where this both can come together and create, uh, try to make it happen. So I think now, and nowadays I also see like astronauts everywhere. Like I see this tile company, like a floor tile company, and they have an astronaut sitting on the moon with a tile.
Got it.
So
It's in
I
it's in
think
the popular consciousness. Yeah,
yes. So now we
space
have
is
this
cool.
space culture coming in.
Yeah.
Space culture is coming in, and I think it's very much important to create a culture to promote. And that is why one of the core projects that at my studio we have worked is experiential space tourism. So how do we experience space tourism being on the earth? So we have to give that environment for people to imagine and think what a space looks like, what how it's going to make them feel, so that they can think of getting a career in space sector.
Interesting. Oh, I thought you were going to say, we need a space theme park, which is
Yes, yes,
probably
we
probably a
need.
good idea. Yeah, we should.
I am working on it.
That's
But
something.
it's
There you
also,
go. We should.
yes, but I
That's a
think
good.
also one of the biggest challenge that I've also faced is people ask, okay, where is your product? What have you built it? Have you tested it? These are the questions that we are often asked. But then, how can I build a space habitat, completely working space habitat, and then, and then, how can I test it and then ask for the funding?
Yeah.
It is a process. Funding is a process. We have TRL level from 1 to 10. I have to start asking for funding from TRL 3 so that I can reach TRL 6. So there are still, I think I can say that 40% investors doubt what if this is going to fail. So what happens? The most promising space companies like let's say Pixel,
Sure.
Peersite, these companies are also based in US. They're not only in India, so they have one office space in US, one office space in India, or somewhere else abroad, where they also get the funding easily, so they can develop the technology. So there's a company called Pixel which got a NASA contract,
Yeah.
right?
And are you saying that the sort of investor appetite for risk and sort of comfort with space technology investment is still greater in the US than it is in India? That will
Yes,
change. That will change. That will change. Um,
yes.
and I think sorry, just picking up on your point about there's now a sort of space culture in India, and thinking about your desire to sort of convince ISRO that the interior of the astronaut should reflect India, right? It shouldn't look like every other space habitat that's ever been done. How do you think that? I mean, that's something like that at Sarah I've always been extremely excited about. Is as more nations start to get active in space, it's not going to all look. Hopefully, it's not going to all look the same, and they're not just going to copy and paste the way that things have been done in the past by Europe, China, Russia, the United States. That the fundamentals will be challenged, that the culture will be different, that all these things will reflect a broader set of cultural values, of aesthetic values. Like I agree. I want to see the Israel rocket look Indian, right? It should look Indian. Um,
Yes.
so how do you see that playing out more broadly? One of the questions I was going to ask you is space culture. I mean, certainly in the UK and the US, where I've spent most of my life, the number one the number one influence is science fiction. So there's always been this interesting relationship, or very direct relationship, sometimes even sort of technical inspiration, coming from science fiction. Is there a science fiction culture? Is science fiction popular? I know the space program is popular. Are you seeing TV shows set in space, films about space missions? Has that come online yet in India? No.
Um, Not many, but there has been a film called The Rocketry, where they talked about
Okay.
ISRO scientists who first proposed the rocket for ISRO. So there has now Mangalyaan movies also there. So I think now there are more movies focused on ISRO's previous successful missions, and I think there's also a movie in the making for women who worked hard for this Chandrayaan mission. So they are making documentary. So we do have like a documentary films on particular scientists,
Okay.
but I have not seen a space cartoon yet.
Okay.
But yes, but I think now it is coming because even in schools, so because I also do workshops just for my fun, just to inspire small children. We do these art in space competitions and things like that. So now I see a lot of enthusiasm from schools to have space, more focus on space themes, space
Mhm.
food in India. We also do this space food tasting experience in India. I do that. We have
I've,
partner
I've heard
companies.
I've heard that the food on on the space station could do with improvement. So I think
Yes.
so.
Uh, yes. And when you said about space culture, I think now in India, uh, it's more about the language. So let's say, for example, so I'll tell you, Indian space program would be also very much focused with Sanskrit roots. So we have this astroscience. India has been very famous for astrology,
Yeah.
astroscience in past, right? I think also in US, NASA had been trying to understand the Sanskrit, the some space science in Sanskrit from Indian culture. There has been. I have a friend who is studying who is a graduate PhD from UC Berkeley, and he used to refer Sanskrit books for some of the maths for space. But I think so. In what India will be trying to do is have its own cultural roots from Sanskrit. Also have food like which are I think mostly vegan or vegetarian. uh,
Interesting.
I think that hydroponics will be more focused on vegetarian, and it can also be more focused towards herbs, Indian herbs like tulsi, brahmin, which are like also medicinal. I talked about it previously, and they might also want to introduce an area for a yoga. I think Subhanshu Shukla, astronaut whom I'm working with for one project, who is flying to space in exam space. this year. He's going to perform space yoga in space.
Wow.
So yes, I think that was a news.
Who did you say he was flying with?
Sorry,
Which launch provider is he flying with?
his Shubhanshu Shukla is flying with Exam Space
Okay, got it. And he's going to
for an
perform a
ISRO
yoga in
mission.
space.
For
That's
ISRO
really
mission,
interesting.
yeah. So there has been news that he's going to perform a space yoga. So I think a lot of focus will be towards natural well-being of a human, Indian human in space, rather than trying to be on antibiotics or have an exterior machinery support. I think so.
That is really interesting. In my view, that's exactly what excites me about you know a
Yes.
more inclusive sort of space
Yes.
future.
So
That's
I
really
don't know. Yes. So meditation, also meditation, yoga, all of these have a very deep roots in Indian culture. So I think India will be very much focused on designing a holistic habitat for space.
how do you
Holistic.
how do you see that working? I mean, how does that look? How does it look different? I mean, I think
Yeah.
going back to the first question I asked you is that I had a friend who was an architect, and he was so excited about the idea of architecture in space because here on Earth there's a fundamental rule, and it's 1G of gravity, and it determines everything that you do. And I think in his head he thought, the moment that goes away, there's no limits, there's no rules. You can just, it's a sort of pure free play of imagination and thinking about, the kind of the human experience unfettered by gravity. There's no up, there's no down, there's no left, there's no right. So how do you, in your head, when you talk about a sort of holistic human habitat in space,
Yes.
how is it different to what's been built? Because I think, we mentioned, we discussed offline, it is a bit sad that, you have the best view in the world. And up until now, for practical engineering reasons, obviously, almost all space habitats have been sort of pretty boring metal boxes.
Yes.
So how are you gonna? How would you like to? How do you imagine a more sort of humanistic, human-centered um,
Yes. Uh,
living space?
Yes, I think when we design a holistic habitat, one of the more core focus will be biophilic design and including more of biophilic
You,
factors.
you are going to have to tell us all what biophilic means, including me.
Yes. So biophilic is including nature into the design, how we
Okay.
can make best of nature. So let's say, for example, the placement of habitats. Now, in currently International Space Station, we have a very small hydroponic system which is placed in BioLab, one of the corner of space, International Space Station. But when we design an holistic habitat, we can place hydroponic system in the core of the habitat where everybody is passing by.
Hmm.
So you are more inclusive towards nature. So you can see, you can feel the green leafy plantation at the core. So you can see it frequently while you pass by. So that will also support your mental health. Then we can also have this aloe vera. I don't know if you know aloe vera gel. It also supports for radiation. It protects from radiation. It also protects from. It also helps in thermal conductivity and maintaining help in temperature support, or aerogel. So you can also or this. We also have this fungi. Hmm, I'm not getting the word. It's so easy.
Don't
I'm
worry.
missing.
It's a
Uh,
fungi.
yes, we are this. There's a building in Germany in Hamburg which has this green walls, green facade. It has, and
Is it moss or fungi?
sorry.
Is it a moss or is it fungi?
No, I'm not. I forgot the word. It's not even fungi. I will recall. I will tell you. You can have a green paneling. So the room partitions can be green with a it can be like a transparent with a
Mhm.
green gel inside, aloe vera gel, or
Mhm.
what do we call? It's such a simple word. I'm not able to recall.
Moss. I thought it may be moss. Moss.
Similar to moss.
Similar to moss. Okay, fine.
Yes. So this is one of the thing. Then also the lighting system can also support. So you have this more of a blue light during the sleep hours. You have
Mhm.
the reddish during the wake hours. So lighting system also supports psychologically. Then you can have a space for yoga, something similar to yoga, aero yoga, we can say.
Mhm.
So that also supports physiological health. So there are small things that can be designed in such a way. Then placement of also windows, private crew quarters can also be designed for the accurate privacy. That also helps to maintain your sociological social health. So it's still a new concept. It's still an innovation, but it is very much possible because we will need this for long term missions.
Sure. For mental and emotional health.
Yes.
So I guess my question is on your wish list of technology. I asked you earlier if there were technologies that were going to disrupt space. Let's stick with zero gravity architecture. So people are trying to develop space stations that create artificial gravity. As an architect, do you want to return to the sort of 1G experience, or do you think it's more reflective of being in space, and as an architect would you like to play with the fact that people can go up and down and left and right, and there's no sort of omnidirection?
Great question. As I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't limit my thinking and my vision in the life.
Hmm.
So it is always about going beyond the boundaries, breaking those barriers. But of course, the question is also about sustainability. So
Okay.
that definitely we should be going to space, having structures in space, having luxury cuisines in space, technology development. All of this has to be there. Otherwise, what more we can do? But there, it has to be in a sustainable manner. That it does not also exploit on Earth. Like for example, we have a lot of air pollution near the launches, right? So all of that has to be controlled in such a way that Earth does not become a garbage, and then people are in space because we are going from here. So I think sustainability, with sustainability and with green culture on the Earth, we should definitely not only go to space, but we should definitely land on the moon, definitely land on the Mars, and just I want somebody to call us an aliens, like how we have this UFO sighting an alien. We heard about the concept of aliens, right? We have this UFO sightings also. I don't know if there's a documentary on Netflix which is all about UFO sightings. So there is a big world out there to explore. The universe is within us and outside of us.
There is. I think I Yes, I'm interested. I'm always cautious about UFOs and aliens. Um, uh,
Because
sh-
because you see, if
what do Indians think? What do people in India think? I think I saw. I mean, I track the polls on which countries have the highest percentage. India's up. India and Brazil actually, I think, are the two countries where the most people believe in. But it's two different questions, right? I mean, there's is there intelligent life elsewhere in the universe? I would always argue strongly yes. Have they been here? Are they buzzing around? In the equivalent of sort of Ford Mustangs, I think less likely. But yeah, I mean, what do you think? What do people in India think?
um, I think in India, because India is the second popular country in the world, first of all.
Sure.
So, and in India, we have a thing like if one person is doing this, and it's exciting, we would
Hmm.
have more hundred following that.
Okay.
So, I think in India, I think people are now diverting towards space for sure.
Hmm.
Yes.
No, I was told when I spent some time in India that sort of
Yeah.
historically and culturally, there are some areas that believe that humans shouldn't go to space because that's where the gods reside, and we shouldn't be, you know, crashing their fun. So no, but
Uh,
it's always really interesting to see the different cultural attitudes towards space as we travel around. Um,
yes.
it's There are very different preconceptions about what we should and shouldn't be doing. I'm
Uh,
happy. I'm super
yes.
happy that India's got the space bug because as you mentioned, it's a huge population. It's an economic powerhouse. Um,
Yes.
you export brilliant engineers both on hardware and software around the world, and the idea of a nation with that sort of inherent skill set and economic power deciding to really go for it is going to make a huge difference. I mean, competition has always driven a lot of activity in space. So, from my perspective, as someone who's always wanted to see as much activity in space as possible, India getting it, and I think for space architects, the more activity there is, the better.
Yes, yes, that is very true. Also, I think the people that you came across who is saying that we should be, it's also about opportunities, because I think they might also not know that there's an opportunity of such a thing, or it is also about so I have this broad mindset because I was abroad for a few years. I traveled to many countries myself, so I have a bigger perspective towards life. But then also in India, we have quite a population who are still uh, living on an average life scale, right?
Sure.
So that's why they might not have this uh, uh, this vision that something like this can also happen. So that is why a space culture is very important, and it should be affordable to each and every individual.
On that note, I have to wrap up. Thank you so much for your time. That was so interesting. Can you let people know where they can find your work? We'll obviously link to all of your sites, any projects
Yes.
that are upcoming, anything they can get involved in, any educational resources, all that kind of stuff.
Yes. So I think we are working on our website. I think it should be out by end of next month. So most of my work can be found out on Aka Space Studio. It's SPACE spacestudio.com, or on my LinkedIn. Stay connected on my LinkedIn. My LinkedIn ID is Astha Kacha Jala.
There you go. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to catching up soon.
And I just want to add one more thing. Sam, thank you. It was really exciting to be with you in space through this wallpaper at least.
But you can see I've had a go at
And
designing
I
my
can
own
see,
space architecture, right?
and I can see you are already in your background. You're already out of Earth, but then
Yeah,
you also have another Earth on your back.
I know.
So
I
not
know.
sure. But it's great to be with you in space, and I wish you all the great luck and all the best for all the podcasts.
Thank you so much.